So I'd like to introduce our two speakers, Mina Matthews and BJ Kitchin. And do you guys want to briefly just introduce yourselves before I pass it over to you officially to present, Mina and BJ?
Sure, that sounds great. This is BJ Kitchin. I'll go ahead and go first. Let me turn our video on, give you a glance at what we look like in real time here today. Hey, it's me and BJ show. BJ Kitchin, I'm an e-learning specialist with University College. It's been wonderful. I think I've seen a couple of names I recognize, at least, in the list. University College is a unit of the University of Maine system. We're not a campus. We're a service unit. We serve all of the campuses throughout the University of Maine system, particularly with regard to distance education from all formats, from blended or web-facilitated online education to completely online. And we travel the state. We have a large state. Just a couple weeks ago, we were at our most northern point, which is practically Canada, or Fort Kent. And just last week, we were in Portland, which is our most southern point. And we're happy to be here today.
And I'm Mina Matthews. I'm an instructional designer with University College, and I think BJ did a great job introducing University College, so we can move on.
Absolutely. All right, so can folks let me know if they see the first slide of our Blackboard in the flipped classroom? All right, great. I see those check marks going up. Well, thank you for participating today. As I said, Mina and I are pleased to be here, and we were certainly honored to hear from Blackboard that they would like us to present a session on flipped methodology in the classroom. As you probably gathered, our background is primarily in higher education, but I think everything we present today, regardless of your teaching environment, be it K-12 or adult ed or higher education, should be applicable, and hopefully you'll get from it what you came for. So I'm going to move us ahead in the presentation. One of the things that you might notice is a little bit of lag. Just hang in there. We'll try to be cognizant of that so we don't talk too quickly beyond the slides. So what do we want to cover today? What you should be seeing is a slide with a big question mark, and we'll be talking about what flipping is. We'll also be talking about why to flip your course. What are the benefits? What are the reasons why it might be interesting to you? What impact might it have on the active learning in the class or student participation? We're going to talk a bit about how to flip the class, what tools to use, primarily looking at Blackboard, but also other tools that are out there and available to facilitate the flip model within Blackboard or in another platform. And so we'll be covering those things, and then we'll end with some questions. And as Ashley said, please do ask questions throughout. We may not get to all of them right away, but we'll try to answer some as we go anyway. But certainly at the end, we're going to save about 10 or 15 minutes for some question and answer. Let's move ahead.
So what's flipping? Essentially, a flipped classroom moves lecture to homework and hands-on activities to the classroom. So what that means is you're kind of shifting your focus from doing the lecture in the face-to-face environment, which is the first point of contact for new content from your students' perspective. You're giving them that opportunity to have first contact with that content in their own environment, in a personalized space where they can process at their own speed as they need to. And then you're taking that classroom time, the actual face-to-face time, and turning that into the hands-on activity period, rather than having them do their homework alone without any guidance from you. So we can go ahead and move forward. And there are just a couple of caveats about what a flipped classroom is and what a flipped classroom is not. And I know that slide is still loading for you. So the first thing I wanted to point out is that a flipped classroom is a blended model that increases learner outcomes. It is not an exclusively online course. Now, having said that, it doesn't mean that the video tactics that we'll teach you in this session are not relevant for an online course. These strategies will work for video production for fully online courses, What will not work is the hands-on activity piece where you're face-to-face and guiding the instruction for your students. Additionally, what a flipped classroom is it does allow your students to have control over their own learning. So rather than run home and first contact with that content be perhaps engaging just with a textbook, they now have the actual teacher's lecture in addition to that textbook or whatever other materials the teacher is having them learn from before they actually deal with trying to apply the lesson in that face-to-face environment. It is not exclusively self-directed learning. In a flipped classroom, the teacher is the guide, and that instructor serves as, in the face-to-face encounter, as the person who ensures that the student, or provides the student the opportunity to ask questions about the application. Skipping ahead as you can read this, this is a student-professor interaction. It is not strictly video-led instruction. There is still the expectation that instructors will be part of the learning experience for the student outside of the video. And this is not students watching videos during class time. That kind of defeats the purpose of flipping. And then lastly, it's not lockstep learning. Additionally, students can go at their own pace. As I said before, they can pause video to learn the content. But lastly, I do want to talk about, and we will get into this in detail, a method that I've come up with. I call it glasses for creating good video for your web consumption or for DVD consumption, meaning video that allows students to actually pay attention to the entire session of the content, perhaps a little bit different than what we're used to.
So I can see a question in the chat section about can we post the link so you can advance the Prezi on your own. You know, I actually built this and finished editing it just a short while ago with the desktop version of Prezi, so I haven't uploaded this version to the web yet to do that. I wish I had. That's a good point, Caleb. We will be posting this link so that you'll have access to it after the fact. Apologize for the refresh rates and load times, but we'll hopefully be able to work through those. So moving ahead, so why flip the course? Flipping is a relatively new idea in some respects, at least as a more formal approach to presenting educational content in a course. But there are some benefits to it, and of course, mainly, as we'll get into, it's about spending more of that face-to-face time actually engaged in active learning. For example, I mean, you are all engaged in somewhat of a flip model at the moment. You've sought out information that you want to be exposed to, and then at some point in the future you'll take this information and then act on it in the real world, in your real setting, essentially paralleling the flipped model. So moving ahead. So
when to flip, when you're considering whether or not a lesson is worthy of flipping, because this is not a one-size-fits-all. It's not a method that will apply to every single lesson that you want to teach or to every single content area that you focus on. So these are just some examples of things that you can consider before you make the determination that your lecture or lesson is worth flipping. First, flip if it really does need to be a lecture. So what I mean by that is occasionally the exchange of information between the instructor and the student does need to come in the form of some kind of visual aid and audio instruction, perhaps with text accompaniment. I'm thinking of explaining complex theories or fact-based scenarios such as in science courses or math classes. So if it really does need to be a lecture, then maybe it is time to flip. However, if you're teaching something that's more organic or theoretical or philosophical, where the course should be more discussion-driven, a lecture flip may not be the appropriate direction to go. Additionally, if you are looking at a mastery approach, meaning that you want your students to master one level of competence before they move on to the next item or component in your content plan. If you're dealing with complex concepts that you think your students will need time to process, again, math, science, foundational skills that build off each other, grammar. If you want to develop self-directed or exploratory learning skills as well, meaning you are going to give them the video for instance, and it doesn't always have to be a video, but let's say it's a video. You give them the video, and in addition to that, you want your students to explore or find material that relates to the content on their own and share that with one another. And then it's making sure that the technology is easily accessible to everyone. This is key, particularly in K through 12 classrooms, where access to equipment may be lower than in higher education settings. It's fairly standard that higher education settings now do expect their students to have computers, but even so, you can't assume that. And in addition to this, it's a matter of digital divide and technical literacy as well. So if you're going to flip your course and you're going to put all your videos into Blackboard, one thing you want to be sure of is that your students do actually have equal ability and access to the technology to watch the videos at home. Otherwise, you'll notice a bigger gap or a bigger divide in the experience of your students who are technologically literate or who have access to technology versus the ones who don't.
So, Mina, I just want to emphasize the digital divide issue just quickly. If you think about the range of skills and comfort levels you and your students have with the various technologies that you use, it's imperative in any online model from flipped to fully online that you think about the difficulty and literacy needs for using any technology that you're going to use in the flipped model. So that you're accounting for, the support and information up front that your students are going to need to be successful with the content that you put into the flipped model. That can't be emphasized enough. It's certainly one of the design principles Mina and I talk a lot about in all of our workshops, is that designing for interaction through the tech, with the tech, is a critical design issue. So back out of that just a little bit. So a quick question, a poll, maybe Ashley you can help me with this. How many of you have practiced flipped classroom tactics in your educational setting? We're getting there. All right, so many of you have. This is good to see. And how many of you have read any of the any formal scholarship on the issue of flipped classrooms? Once this poll is cleared, go ahead and try again. So formal scholarship. Great. So as you know, it's a growing body of literature, and I think that's important because we have from the perspective of probability and the art of teaching, as well as the scholarship and evidentiary base of research in this area, the tactics. So what I'm presenting to you now will be linked to you in the information that we send after the course. This is a study done by a professor, adjunct faculty, I can't remember actually the university, but she was looking at two cohorts. One was a 400-seat lecture-style course, and the other one was a small, 25-seat, 25 to 30-seat course, both biological science. I'm sharing with you some details that she provides in that study about the students' statements towards their flipped class experience. Now, as you can see here, she's asking in this Likert scale basic agreement questions with regard to, did they think it helped them study more throughout the unit? Did the flipped approach help them learn more? And obviously you can see, as can I, that most of the students strongly agree that the flipped classroom was useful and beneficial. One of the other pieces of this study show she compared her attendance rates in those two courses with prior semester face-to-face courses without the flipped model, and she saw significant increases in both classes with regard to attendance using the flipped model, which I think is interesting. One thing I'll point out, I kind of get a chuckle out of this fact. At the end here, she says, she shows that some of her students did strongly disagree with the effectiveness of her approach to using a flipped model. And if you read the qualifier here at the bottom, the students who generally strongly disagreed, she claims that they indicated on the survey that they had never completed assigned work before attending a class. So as you can imagine, there's a trust factor here. If you're going to make use of the model, your students will really need to complete the content that you posted in this on the web and outside of class, or showing up to class is going to be, as you can imagine, a lot less useful. All right, we'll let this load for you.
So I'm just thinking, I didn't include the research in here, but I will just add to what BJ said. There's additional research out there between 2010 and 2012 that suggests that students push back on the flipped model, at least initially, where they have their video lectures at home and they're encountering the textbook at home, and then they get into the classroom and they're doing this hands-on activity, which may feel more like a guided or directed study hall. And so there are some students who will push back and say, why do I need this flipped model of learning? And typically that takes place at the beginning. And as BJ's, what BJ just described in the last table points out is that by the end, the vast majority see the value in flips. And from a designer's perspective, we would recommend that you merely plan for that, scaffold that in, explain to them up front why you're flipping your class, explain to them up front what the value of that flip will be. So we're looking at why not to flip, and sorry, we jumped ahead, and now that's going to load. Just give us 1 second. So why wouldn't you flip? And the first thing that I would point out is gaps in digital literacy or access, which we discussed previously. This is a really key component because if you do have, particularly again in K through 12, if you do have students who are going home into environments that have no technology and no tech literacy or support around them, then you're basically asking them to stay after school to complete this work, and the likelihood of that happening is lower. So one contingency plan for that would be to potentially burn DVDs or to work with the students during study hall time to watch those videos. One additional counterpoint to flipping would be the students really need more screen time, because by putting your lectures into video format, or at least using pre-existing videos to do your flipped model, you are requiring your students to sit in front of a screen for a longer period of time than perhaps they normally do. Again, we talked about limited access to tools needed to view the videos. That comes along with the digital literacy piece. And they don't always understand, again, that value of in-class hands-on training. This is a paradigm shift. So again, you'll want to make sure you scaffold that for them.
Okay, let's go moving ahead. All right, so as you can see here, we're flipping. And we'll get into more of the how-tos and techniques and tools available to actually flip your content in your course. And before I drill in here to this particular slide, I think we haven't mentioned, at least not clearly, that all of what you'll be doing here is obviously learning objective focused. And so as Mina described, the reasons why to flip the classroom always have to go back to your learning objectives, and they have to align, both in the reason for that as well as the techniques that you use. So I will move ahead.
While we're moving ahead, I noticed that we have a question. That question is from, is it Angel Kimball? What is your rule of thumb for out-of-class pre-work time per credit hour? Generally speaking, we typically say that per credit hour is 2 to 3 hours outside of class per week on homework activities, or we would now call this video activities. However, we can't treat our video material the same way we would homework or self-guided study material. There's a slight variation there, and we'll actually get to that in the how I flip this model. BJ, did you have anything you wanted to add to that question?
No, but I think it's important. I like Angel's question because being cognizant of the student's time commitment outside of the course and your expectations of them, also particularly what you explicitly communicate them at the beginning of your semester. I'm sure all of you have done this in the past, is you let them know what they can expect for outside class time commitment, particularly with adult learners where, if they're anything like BJ, they have a poverty of time and every moment needs to be budgeted. So, one of the things that's critical to use is if you're going to produce video for your course, you want to make sure it's quality video. And the minimum quality, obviously is a matter of choice, but we have some guidelines here that we'd like to recommend. We think they're pretty easy to follow, and certainly share these with your students if you're asking your students to make videos as well. A little later on, we'll show you a tool within Blackboard, among others, on how to make that video. But create or reuse videos specifically for online students. What's critical there is that you're not recording that standing up in front of a lecture that took place, 3 semesters ago, and you're answering questions from that population of students in front of you. And the online student or the student who's viewing this information for the first time is really having kind of a dissonant experience because the content really wasn't meant for them. I know for some of you who maybe haven't experienced this yourself, it might not resonate, but I assure you that hearing particularly current events come up that are actually old lets you know, or sometimes communicates to the student that they're getting, for lack of a better way to put it, sloppy seconds. So make sure that you're creating your video specifically for the course. It doesn't mean you can't pre-record videos and reuse them. So what you would do in that case is just make sure you're recording your material in a way that isn't contextually time-based, so your students feel like they're the first group looking at these things. Find audio and video assets, like games, web tools, learning objects to send home. Look for these things that really lend themselves to that online environment. Again, of course, making sure they align with your learning objectives. And prepare lively face-to-face activities. I can't express enough. The whole point of this is to get that hand-over-hand, side-by-side active learning activities within the classroom, so the students are now taking that information they've been exposed to and reworking it in their brains and in their bodies. They're up, if it makes sense, up and moving around, collaborating, solving problems with you alongside, guiding them through that experience.
Well, and just to add to that briefly, if you're used to or familiar with the theory of learning preferences, which I do understand is somewhat controversial, you would know that tactile learners tend to be the least catered to in a face-to-face classroom. And tactile learners are those who prefer to experience content or learn new content through actual hands-on or touching-based experiences, moving their bodies. And as you can imagine, in a traditional classroom with a person lecturing at the front of the classroom and writing on the board and asking questions, there's not a lot of room for tactile. So the flipped model really does lend itself to including that group of students who have been traditionally left off the bus. So here is just a short acronym that I created to help you kind of remember how to produce your videos for the web. The first thing is it's glasses, and the first thing is good lighting. So I can't tell you how many times I've worked with a professor who was asking me to critique their video lectures for their course, whether it was online or flipped, and they have, because we don't think of these things, they have the light in front of their face or behind their face, like a window behind their face, and their face is completely in shadow while they're talking at the screen. And the experience of that for any of us would be difficult because we can't see the person's face, we can't see their eyes. So just make sure that the lighting is in front of your face. It's a simple one. Make sure it's in front of your face before you start recording. Activated short sequences. Now, when we create video for home consumption or web consumption for a learning environment, we need to remember that they have to be active. And what I mean by that is, video is traditionally a passive experience, meaning that we tend to sit back and absorb video passively for pleasure or for entertainment, whereas learning is an active experience. When we're in a classroom, we are ideally alert, on the edge of our seat, paying attention, raising our hand, interacting, discussing, asking questions. Now, if we create lecture videos for our students that are passive, then our students are not necessarily going to be engaged learners or even be motivated to listen to or watch our videos. So activated short sequences means two things. First, try not to make your videos any longer than 3 to 6 minutes. Now, I know that's going to be very difficult if you're used to a 60-minute lecture or even a 3-hour lecture, but traditionally, if you are lecturing face-to-face, you're actually doing a lot more than lecturing. You may repeat yourself, you may lean in, you may ask questions, you may have a side conversation with a student, and those things don't need to happen in a web-based video. So you can shorten your videos, and if you still find that you still have like 40 minutes of lecture, you just can't cut it down any more than that, then chunk it into shorter lectures. So you'll have a series of 6-minute videos that add up to roughly 42 minutes of video rather than one long 40-minute video. Because what we know is that we may think that students can just pause the video and wait, go do something and come back, or fast forward through parts. What we know is they don't do that. They actually leave the video playing, get up and walk away. So instead, shorter videos. What I mean by activated is include some component in those videos that forces your student to do something. So you might say, at the beginning of the video, I'm going to include a prompt for a discussion question, and I expect you to contribute to that online before you come to class. Or you might say, we're going to cover what your hands-on activity will be when we get together for our face-to-face session this week. So be prepared to listen to this because I expect you to come to class with some materials. So you're giving them some instruction where they have to activate the experience. And then for exclusive students, the last part of the acronym, refers to exactly what we were just talking about with making your videos for your online students exclusively. A video that you create of yourself talking to another group of students is not for that body of students that you are flipping for or that you're creating an online video for, and they know it, and it creates a dissonance in their learning experience. So create these videos directly for the students. That actually affords you a really great resource for efficiency, because if you create those videos directly for your students, you can then go back and pretty easily edit them if things change or if there is content that you need to update or add to.
And so you get a real efficiency workload issue there. I mean, if you've made an hour-long video, it's much more of a hassle to transcode and edit that video just to change, maybe 30 seconds of information. Whereas if you've only got 30 seconds of a 6-minute segment, you've just saved yourself a lot of time. So, how do we support this flipping process? What are the tools that we have available to us? In most cases, one size does not fit all. I'll let that load here. Give it a second. So what I want to talk to you about is, using Blackboard and Collaborate, much like we have here. We're recording this session again for review at your convenience later, and so that is definitely a technique that is useful. The ability to rewind, stop, and particularly if it's a transcribed verbatim transcript along with the video, which I know there will be captions provided with the recording of this video, that textual representation of the video along with the video itself starts to hit on all of those, or at least a broader spectrum of those learning preferences that your students have. And having a text transcript of video to study by, to mark up, to share, is another way that students can interact with the knowledge and the content so that they can learn it. The sorts of tools you see below here, YouTube, VoiceThread. In Blackboard, one of the wonderful things in 9.1 that I certainly enjoy is the ability to have video everywhere and also mashups. And mashups are simply the ability to grab other content that other folks have made and pull it into Blackboard and present it to your students, whereas Video Everywhere is a tool that allows you to either pull from a pre-recorded video from your YouTube channel or the ability to have either yourself or your student use the webcam to record their own contribution to a particular item, which is really neat. We'll show you a video here to demonstrate that. What I'm about to do is I'm going to push to you a video from Blackboard on Video Everywhere. What you'll notice is that it's going to open within the Collaborate environment, and it will open the YouTube channel itself. It will automatically stop playing. So what would be best is if you just let it play and not stop it. Okay, so I see some folks asking some questions, having a slightly varied experience of the Follow Me feature, and there's some responses coming at you there. Thank you for pointing that out. Just really quickly, one of the things I wanted to make sure that you understood with regard to Video Anywhere is that everywhere rather, is that it really is video everywhere. So you can really, instead of your students who maybe would prefer to speak their contribution to a discussion thread or a journal entry or a blog post within Blackboard, they really can enter that via the Video Anywhere. And
so there's actually a reason, just to add to that why we would prefer that you use Video Anywhere or the Mashups feature in Blackboard than actually linking out to videos where the student has to click on a link inside Blackboard and then open up a new window or leave that particular tab into another tab to watch the video. There's a phenomenon, just a quick poll, have you ever walked through a door and forgotten what you were looking for on the other side of that door when you walked through it? So you're sitting in the living room and you remember that you need a cup of coffee, and as soon as you get into the kitchen you forgot why you came in there? Yeah, lots of yeses. That's actually a phenomenon. That phenomenon is when we walk through doors, we're much more likely to forget something. And the web is basically a series of doorways. So if you ask your students to leave one, we'll call it a classroom, one Blackboard classroom, and basically go to another classroom on a field trip to watch a video, you're running the risk of them forgetting the context of why they're there to watch that video. So one way to minimize that is to actually embed the video directly into Blackboard using the Mashup or the Video Anywhere feature.
And so you can see this small sampling of tools from Screencast-O-Matic, one of my favorites, very easy to use, to Jing, to YouTube, to VoiceThread, as well as some others. Following this presentation, we put together a list of some of our favorite links to not just these tools, but also some articles about how to use them strategically in the flipped model. I think you'll find them interesting and useful, and you'll have plenty of those to dig into to dive deeper following today's talk. So I'm going to go ahead and move us forward. Whoop. So what do I need to know? What do my students need to know? The reasons for doing the flipped model clearly, why you're choosing to use this model in your course, and be ready to have a conversation with them that this is going to be a paradigm shift for them. I think setting up your approach, particularly for your first time, that this is an adventure. It's a bit of a Lewis and Clark for you if this is your first time, so that you can be more tolerant of errors and discoveries. But you also want to know what are some strategies based on the topic that you teach. And we would encourage you to both look into the materials that we're sending you, but also just do some of your own research related to the topic that you teach in flipped tactics or flipped strategies. And I'm quite certain that you'll run into, or you'll find and discover, just a number of very interesting and potentially usable strategies to flip content in your course as aligned with your learning objectives. Now, we want to show you at least one more video. We're running out of time, but we want to turn you on to the Phys video series, because I think following the presentation, it's just quite a gold mine of materials to look at. And then we'll move quickly to the end so that we have time for questions, to spend more focused time on your questions. But I can't emphasize enough that we'll be sending you not just this presentation, but also just a number of resources that we haven't presented today that I would say I'm most certain that you'll find very useful and very interesting. So I'm about to open the Follow Me feature, and for you who are on your iPad, I understand it will be missed for now, but it will come later. Okay, so let me bring the video, the presentation back. One thing I do hope you visit the Professor
Dr. Lodge McCammon.
Thank you, Dr. Lodge McCammon. His website and his resources, they've really grown and they're quite spectacular, and I think you'll find some things there that are very interesting and easy to use. Yeah, sure, I'll post that particular video into the chat there. The other thing to think about with Dr. McCannon's work is that he is working more and more towards contributing to the literature base. So he's got research there that backs up, his thinking and logic around why the flipped model is a useful one to use in the classroom, in the face-to-face classroom. Let me get my presentation back.
And for instructional designers, he's kind of a rock star, so we asked permission to use this video in our presentation, and he wrote back to us and gave it, so we were pretty excited about that.
Yeah, he's a pretty accessible guy, so I would encourage you to go ahead and email him yourself, and that contact information is on his website. We're not going to play this next video, but we wanted to turn you on to it if you're not familiar with it. By a show of hands, we have about 5 minutes before we'll open up questions. But how many of you are familiar with TED Ed? Quite a few. Excellent. Well, TED Ed offers some neat opportunities for you to either reuse materials that they've already put on the website, but also an opportunity as you get into it to actually publish your own recorded videos through the TED Ed interface. There's a couple of options with regard to Blackboard or another web-based application to present TED Ed videos in their entirety, which include the quizzing features and the dive deeper features. The way that you could do it within Blackboard is certainly through the Mashup tool, in which case you would just get the video and not the container around the video with questions and dive deeper. But what you could do in Blackboard in that case is actually use quizzing or polling features to go along with your TED Ed video. And
what TED Ed really does is it gets at that part of the acronym of GLASSES that I referred to, which is activate the learning experience by forcing your students or encouraging your students to contribute some kind of knowledge to the base of the content that they're interacting with. You're asking a question, you're asking them to do something that engages their activated learning senses.
And so I think at this point, what's our time? We've got 1:45. We'd like to go ahead and open it up for questions for folks. If you have questions of us or of the group, maybe you could type them into chat and we could spend some time talking about them.
I believe we covered all of the questions that were posted in the chat during the presentation. Right. If I am incorrect, please post those again, and also just add new questions as they come to you.
So Angel's asking how we add videos in Blackboard. So specifically, adding videos in Blackboard is become an extremely easy, of course I say that is relative, I suppose, more easy tech solution within any content editor, assuming that the Mashup tool is enabled in your instance of Blackboard. And of course, you get to that by going to your control panel and then customization and tools. You can use the Mashup tool to actually search for video on YouTube, or you could use the Video Anywhere tool. And if you missed the video we shared earlier, you'll get it after this presentation, where you have about a 1.5 minute demonstration about how to use the Video Everywhere tool. And the Video Everywhere tool, again, would allow you to pull in even your unlisted videos from your YouTube account, as well as any any video that you wanted to record using your webcam directly into the course.
So I'm seeing this question about bugs, and particularly in your service pack. So we have service pack 13, and it's pretty much ironed out for us. So you may feel that coming down the pike. But the alternative is to use YouTube Mashups rather than the Video Anywhere. So you'd actually go to YouTube, record your video on YouTube. It's very simple. You click the upload button. You click the webcam button, record, stop recording, and you're done. And then once you have that video, you can actually pull that into Blackboard using the Mashups feature. The Video Anywhere option really just kind of allows you to do it right inside of Blackboard, but you can still embed videos in Blackboard using the Mashup feature.
So, and another thing is as people are pointing out, different institutions are at different installs or instances of their Blackboard configuration. What we hope that you might be able to take away from this particular presentation is information about maybe some questions to ask of your institution as to the state of affairs. But I think basically, to include good video into your courses, the worst case scenario is that you could just provide a link. And of course that goes through that doorway phenomena that Mina talked about earlier. But that's tolerable, it's not ideal.
And there are some design solutions you can create for that, such as using a graphic to represent the video, and you put that in Blackboard and make that the clickable link so that they can kind of see through the doorway before they walk through it.
In other words, grab the thumbnail of the first video and then use that as your linkable button.
Misty, I don't know if you can. If you can hear me, sorry, DJ, I was just going to ask Misty, our solutions engineer, if perhaps she could follow up with Sue Wolf after the call to see if she could provide some tips for making their Video Everywhere work more effectively.
Yeah, that's a great plan.
Okay, Misty. Misty's typing in the chat. Okay, great. Thank you.
Fantastic. Yes, absolutely. They'll be coming through following this presentation, Jody. We've added quite a number of videos that refer to both tools and strategies and literature on flipping the classroom. I should give you an hour, several hours of enjoyable reading on the couch, Jody, absolutely.
Yes, I will be providing a long list of resources following this session. Actually, my colleague Lauren will be sending that follow-up email. It will include a link to this deck, a link to the recording, a link to all the videos that were presented, any additional resources that were discussed on the call. So you'll have a full resource email sent this week.
Additionally, if there are questions that you think of after this presentation, after the video is posted to YouTube, I'm sure BJ and I will be trolling the YouTube comments, and we'll try to answer those questions as they come up on those YouTube comments for you. So as long as comments are enabled, if you do have questions down the road, don't hesitate to ask them. I think we are the resource.
Just the Video Anywhere and Mashup, all we've presented today, I mean, there are a lot of affordances built into Blackboard that can be strategically used as a flipped tool. We certainly didn't cover all of them. We mostly spoke about the video components because it's such kind of a foundational tool within the flipped model. But certainly, light quizzing, talk over PowerPoint, ways to introduce new information to your students through Blackboard are plentiful and go well beyond video. If you haven't already, there are two resources that I use constantly that I love that have been produced by Blackboard. One is their help.blackboard.com. If you might post that, help.blackboard.com is useful for instructors and for students. It's just a fantastic website. I like it a lot. I would also say that
On-demand.blackboard?
Yes, thank you. ondemand.blackboard.com is also a wonderful tool. And then finally, subscribe up from your YouTube channel to the Blackboard YouTube channel. There are lots of very brief instructional and demonstration videos on most all of the tools that you can share with your students or just make use of yourself.
And I will just echo that Blackboard has invested significant amounts of time into updating help.blackboard.com. It's very, very easy to navigate. It's very easy to find the resources that you need. I really would encourage you to check that out if you haven't already. You can filter based on the service pack that you're currently running, what specific functionality you need to find an answer about. It's a pretty great resource.
So Jody, I agree with you. I think pre-class assessment, I mean, that instructional piece of assessing your students' needs from the get-go, what a great strategy through the flip model.
And it reflects back to Gagne's 9 events of learning, which starts with prior knowledge recall, asking your students to remember what they already know about a topic. Any other questions?
Don't be shy. We're from Maine. We're hospitable. It's actually snowing out here today.
Mina and BJ, do you guys just want to post your emails in the chat?
Sure.
Just in case people didn't grab those from the initial presentation.
You bet.
Thanks, guys. Are there any other questions for BJ and Mina? Okay. Well, I would like to thank BJ and Mina. This was a great presentation. Thank you for your time. Yes, Misty Cobb is applauding. This was a great resource for me and I think for everyone on the call that attended. So I really appreciate you guys presenting today. Just a recap for folks in terms of follow-up items. As I mentioned, I'll send a follow-up, correction, Lauren Karzarek, my colleague, will be sending a follow-up email with all the resources that you need, including a link to this recording, link to all the videos, etc. If you guys have any requests for 2014 BITS webinars, just shoot an email to community@blackboard.com, or you can just send me an email, and I'll make sure it gets where it needs to go. And we will kick off with a new series starting in February. Anything else you guys want to add, BJ and Mina?
No, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for having us.
Absolutely, and by far, you know, folks, if you're Google Plus users, Mina and I are avid posters and contributors to content on Google Plus. You can find us using those email addresses we post. We'd love to have you follow us. We'll follow you back. And again, as I said before, we're posting content like this and musings, if you will, around online education on nearly a daily basis.
Great. I will definitely be following you guys as well.
Great, thanks.
All right. Thanks, everyone, and have a great week. And that's it. Thanks, guys.
All right. Everybody have a great day.